Welcome to Adventure Gear TV. Today we have the Zero Breeze Mark III Portable HVAC unit. This is the third generation in Zero Breeze's lineup, which was traditionally just air conditioners. This one is over twice as powerful as the Zero Breeze Mark II, and you can also use it to provide heat in those cooler climates. And today we're going to find out how it performs inside of my minivan camper and inside of my tent. Zero Breeze started with a complete redesign with this Mark III, but a few features that really stand out from my initial impressions are that 5,280 BTUs with the same amount of power consumption. And in the previous model that I had, I was always fumbling around looking for the cables, but this one has a cable built into the battery, and you'll see later in the video that when I have multiple batteries, I can daisy chain them and I can charge them all at the same time. And the thing that impressed me the most about the Zero Breeze Mark III, and that's even compared to any of the other portable HVAC units that are out there right now, is that this one has a pump inside, so when you're done using it, it expels as much of that moisture that's stuck in there as possible. That means that you shouldn't spill water every time you have to move this air conditioner when it's not in use. So that's enough of an initial overview of the system. Let's get it set up inside of the tent and see how it performs. And just like all these other HVAC units, this thing comes with quite a bit of hoses. Each one of those hoses serves its own purpose. They are for the inputs and the outputs of this portable HVAC unit. And for this test, I'm inside of this hot tent, which does an excellent job of retaining its temperature. But inside of it, it is not insulated. So let me get some of these hoses installed. That way I can get this air conditioner working so I don't start sweating. The exhaust vents are hooked up. Now the only thing I have left to do is plug in the battery. Getting this thing going is as simple as holding the power button for about 3 seconds, and that thing started blowing cool air almost instantly. Zero Breeze claims that the Mark III will cool spaces up to 250 square feet. The tent that I'm in has a height of about 8.5 feet, a diameter of about 15 feet. That equates to 176 plus or minus square feet and almost 500 cubic feet of internal volume. So this space is actually within tolerance of what Zero Breeze claims that it should be able to cool. Right now I've got the baffle, which is another upgrade, facing or pointing right to my face. That baffle is stopping me from sweating. However, I do want to point out this tent is not insulated and it's also not perfectly sealed. So although it will provide a much better seal than a regular tent with a rain fly over it, it is allowing some of the heat from the outside to come in. And another benefit that I have for today's test is that although it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit outside, I don't have direct sunlight on my tent. If I did have direct sunlight, I would want to wait until this evening after the sun is set so that I can conduct this test. So one of the main themes that I've had on this channel with these portable HVAC units is you really never want to be cooling spaces or heating spaces. Yes, these things are advertised to cooler heat spaces, but for me, the best way to use them is to always try to direct that source, that cooling or heating source, as close to wherever you're sitting as possible, so that when you're relaxing, you're trying to get yourself warmed up or cooled off, you have the source of the HVAC system pointing directly at you. The Zero Breeze Mark III is performing exactly as I would expect it to. It's pointing cold air directly at me. It's essentially the equivalent of one of your car's air conditioner outlets when that air conditioner is running at its full maximum capability. The Zero Breeze Mark II does put out 5,280 BTUs when it's in its cooling or its maximum cooling configuration. On top of that, it pulls about 550 watts from a wall outlet. Since it pulls that amount of power and puts out 5,280 BTUs, it has an energy efficiency ratio of about 2.8 to 1. And plain and simple English, what that means is for every watt of power you put into the air conditioner, you're getting almost 3 watts or 2.8 watts of cooling effect back out of it. It's got an output temperature of about 52 degrees. So 52 degrees Fahrenheit right here coming out of the device. I've got it set on 73 degrees Fahrenheit. That's my target. Rocket mode does consume the most power out of this HVAC unit, but you also get the absolute best cooling capability. And I don't know if you guys can hear this thing ramping up, but that is where it's at. And unfortunately, with a battery like the one that's included today, 1022 watt hours, you're only going to get maybe 2 hours max in rocket mode. I do have 2 batteries, and later in the video we will do some complete battery rundown tests with rocket mode and with its lowest power consumption mode as well. Another great upgrade that we have is this little baffle. This allows you to direct the air up or down, and it gives me quite a bit of range of motion for where I want that heat or that cooling effect to be blowing. If I had that hose attached, I would leave this in the center, but if I wanted to sit down in my cot right here, I just have that on its lowest setting and it's kind of hitting the top of my head, which is perfect. The new Zero Breeze battery is ready for 2025. It does come with a USB-C, still has a standard USB-A, and then surprisingly it has an Anderson power pole output. Another upgrade or good feature about this battery is that it is beveled, so if you get some moisture like I have here, it's not going to go into those outlets. It's just going to kind of trickle down the outside of the battery. All these portable HVAC units do have some limitations. In this case, if the ambient temperature of the area that you're trying to heat is below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the condenser and compressor system will struggle to pull any heat out of that ambient air. And on the opposite end of that spectrum, if the ambient temperature is over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, so a pretty warm day, this thing will struggle to cool off that ambient air as well. So now what I'm going to do is turn this off so I can transfer it over to my minivan. I'm simply going to hold the power button. Now listen for the drain. This thing should try to drain itself. So that was not a lot of water. I haven't had this thing running for very long. The main thing I really want to emphasize is a portable HVAC unit like this, no matter what, unless you have a really well insulated space, it's always going to be a tough proposition to cool even something like this tent. I feel like I could sleep comfortably, but what I'll do is I'll show you my minivan, the ultimate or the ideal sleep setup that I would use if I was going to sleep with this HVAC unit. But first what I want to do is show you guys just about how much water comes out of this unit once I have removed it. Now there's not a whole lot, but most of the HVAC units that I do run like this would absolutely drain at least a half a cup or so of water from that move that I just pulled. So whatever comes out of here is much less than anything I would have gotten from my other HVAC systems. As I'm getting this thing set up in the minivan camper, it does have these newer, more flexible handles. They're actually not that bad. They feel pretty sturdy, like they will hold up. So traditionally I have tried to use these HVAC units in the middle of the van, but today I'm going to try something just a little different to see if I can maximize the unit's efficiency, which it looks like it's going to be tight, but I'm going to try it anyway. So first things first, I'm going to hook up the battery that I've already got locked into place. I'm going to hook up my drain hose, and what I want to try to do today that I haven't tried to do in the past is actually run the hoses out of the window. Since this drain hose has a pump that helps it drain, it can actually provide up to 59 inches of drain pressure. So I wouldn't go that high unless I absolutely had to, but according to the specs, it would have no problem draining even at this height above the device. Well guys, I think my fridge might be a little too tall. I was hoping I could make this work right here, but I'm just not going to be able to clear. Let's move this thing around a little bit. Okay, give myself a little more space there, but what I want to do is see if I can run these. I've got everything hooked up. Let me tighten up this window just a little bit. Perfect. And now let's get this thing going because I'm starting to sweat. And this is not exactly a pro setup. If I was going to do this a little more permanently, I would use the included. There is a template right here where I could put the hoses through and eliminate any of the cracks or gaps that we have there. In addition to that, I would probably use something made out of plastic to seal this off a little better as well. And this is not exactly the best setup because I have this massive fridge in here, but I need to get this thing started. And if I was going to make this a more permanent solution, I would probably go with a smaller fridge or use the center console, which I have used in the past with great success, to mount an air conditioner like this. What I want to do, because the best way for me to use this thing is to get that point and shoot, is get this point set up. And this is absolutely crazy, but the Zero Breeze is pushing cool air right on me. And I apologize for it being so dark in here. I don't have a whole lot of lights with me today, but I really like how long this hose is. This thing is able to come essentially from the front of the van all the way to my third row seat, which brings me to my next point. For me, the best way to use these little HVAC units is actually to get inside. So what I would want to do is get inside of my sleeping bag or under my blanket, point this thing at me, and right now the microclimate, the small climate inside of my sleeping bag is actually unbearably cold. And since it's so cold under this sleeping bag right now, I'm going to go ahead and use my remote, turn the fan down a little bit, and now I could just sit here, I could read a book, I could relax. And my core temperature, which is the most important part of your body, obviously, is now the perfect temperature. In fact, it's a little cold, and if I wanted to sleep like this, I do like to sleep in colder temperatures, and I would sleep like a baby. Before we head into the studio to do some real world testing, I want to let you know that Zero Breeze sent this portable HVAC for a test and review. They didn't pay me to say anything, and they have no control over the things I say in this video. Now that that's out of the way, let's head into the studio and see how long this thing will run on both its maximum temperature, maximum HVAC capability, and its lowest settings to see if it will last 7 hours. Before we get too far into the testing, I do want to talk a little bit about the buttons and the modes here. First of all, to turn it on, you're going to want to hold the power button for about 3 seconds. I'm going to cycle it into fan mode so the compressor and condenser don't kick on. You do have your light control button. You can turn the light on, brighter. Right now it's set in the output temperature mode. So this light will get redder as it gets hotter and bluer as it gets colder. But I also wanted to show you, in case you're Canadian like a lot of my viewers, or use the metric system like a lot of my non-US based viewers, you just hold this light button for a few seconds. It'll pop that into Celsius mode. When we talk about the modes, I'm going to go ahead and cycle it over to the first mode, which is rocket mode. Now rocket mode is the most powerful mode. In rocket mode, the system pulls anywhere from 350 watts at its lowest to 500 watts at its max. Later on in the video, we will see how long a single battery will last in rocket mode. Rocket mode is also thermostatically controlled, so if you set your desired output temperature, I'm going to go ahead and hit 75 degrees Fahrenheit here just to minimize my compressor while we're talking. Next we have cool mode. Cool mode is essentially the same as rocket mode, but the power output is anywhere from 200 to 350 watts. So it's one step below rocket mode with a maximum output of 350 watts. Using the standard cool mode is thermostatically controlled just like rocket mode, and you can get anywhere from 3 to 5 hours of runtime in cool mode. Next up we have sleep mode, which you will see later in the video that sleep mode can actually run a lot longer than the claimed 5 to 7 hours, and it is also thermostatically controlled. Fan mode is your least energy consuming mode, and you will see later in this video essentially how well fan mode runs. And I don't know if you can hear in the camera, but in fan mode this thing really quieted down. Next we have care mode. In care mode, so actually this is a 7th mode right here, which is dehumidifier mode. Dehumidifier, you set the desired moisture content of the air, and then this system will essentially try to pull that moisture out of the air. Super efficient, doesn't have really any heating or cooling impact, but it is perfect for trying to lower the humidity, which can in turn improve the feeling of the air without necessarily changing the temperature. Next we have our target or set temperature mode. So in care mode, you can set the output temperature. This will essentially change the output temperature of the device without relying on a thermostat at all to test the incoming air. So this is perfect if you're not going to use all the hoses that come with the device and you just want to maintain a set temperature and a set fan setting and get the maximum runtime in that configuration. So the final setting I want to discuss is heat mode. In heat mode, all of the heat comes out of the back, the cold air is exhausted out of the front. You essentially turn the device around to use heat mode. This thing is actually a little more efficient. It runs at 5,800 BTUs in heat mode, and that has a coefficient of performance of about 3:1. So I just did a complete battery rundown test for one battery, and I'm actually quite surprised with the results. I started the battery with a full state of charge on rocket mode, which is the maximum output of this portable HVAC unit. It was running with an output temperature of 40 degrees Fahrenheit for over 3 hours. So now I've got a second battery. This battery is fully charged, fully topped off. And what I want to test is how long will this HVAC unit run on its lowest setting, that night mode. On the previous Zero Breeze Mark II, I got about 7 hours of runtime. I want to see what I can get with this one. And swapping the batteries is easy. While I start this test, let me go ahead and get this battery, which does not feel hot at all. Doesn't feel hot to the touch. Feels pretty good. Let me get this battery topped off. And oh, by the way, and in that 3 hour period, I got, I want to say maybe a quart of water, maybe a little more than a quart of water. The charger for the Zero Breeze Mark III puts out about 500 watts. This is a huge improvement over the Mark II. That means that with this charger, it takes just a little over 2 hours to charge one of these batteries from empty, which is a significant savings over the previous models, almost 7 hours also to charge the battery. So for this test, I want to set everything up through the app, but let's go ahead and put it in sleep mode. And for this test, let's set the run temperature. Now this is if it's extremely hot and I want the HVAC mode working, I'm gonna set it on something like 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I've also got the fan on its lowest setting. Now what I wanna do is start my timer. 30 seconds isn't gonna make a huge deal. And let's go ahead, let this thing run, see how long it lasts. Well guys, I messed that test up. I wanted to do the maximum runtime, but what I didn't take into consideration was even in that sleep mode, if your set temperature is higher than your desired cooling temperature, in my case, I set it on 75 degrees Fahrenheit, but this room is a little cooler in here because this is a subterranean room. The AC compressor, the condenser system, never actually cycled on, and this thing ran for 18.5 hours, essentially in fan mode with very minimal condenser or compressor outputs. So overall with the testing, I'm impressed with how the Mark III handled both that maximum rocket mode test as well as that sleep mode test. I'm going to use this over the next few months in my minivan camper and see how well it holds up to those more extreme heat temperatures that we will experience as summer starts to get hotter. Now I did choose my system with a second battery. This setup is a little more expensive than some of the other setups out there, but I really like the fact that I can daisy chain the batteries. I can do pass-through charging, meaning I can charge the batteries and run the device at the same time, which for me allows me to use shore power if I have that available. And if I don't have shore power available, with that second battery, I will be able to run this system all night long. So I'm really impressed overall with the innovation with companies like Zero Breeze improving every iteration of their product. This one has that HVAC with heating built in. I didn't really focus on the heating too much for this video, but what you essentially do to run the heat, it does have a heat mode, but you basically face it backwards. So the cycle inside of the device is much more efficient. It only runs essentially in one direction. While it's running in one direction, it puts the cool air out of the front and the hot air out of the back. And so you just rotate it based on which effect you want to get out of the portable HVAC unit. Another big improvement that this generation has over, I think, almost any of the other portable HVAC units that are currently available on the market is that drain mode. When you're done with this thing, it does drain. That is a huge deal, especially if you're using this in a small vehicle and you don't want a ton of water to get everywhere while it's not in use. And then on top of that, these do need to be relatively flat, but with the prior model, if it wasn't perfectly flat, it would overflow a little bit of moisture into my space and not, for example, into this bucket like I have here. So drain mode, a super big improvement for this new 2025 iteration. But the question I know we all want the answer to is, if I had to, would I buy this thing? And the truth is, for my personal budget, this is a little bit expensive. But it's really not expensive when compared to some of the other options out there. So the bottom line is, if cost was not a consideration, I would absolutely consider buying something like this. Zero Breeze went back to the drawing board. They more than doubled the output capability. They added that heating function. They also added that remote drain mode, which makes this thing much less of a mess to move around. In fact, moving it around for this video has not been a problem at all. I have one other complaint I'd like to show you. I do love the fact that we have the chainable batteries. This thing has pass-through charging, but what I don't really like is this connector right here. And while the connector itself works perfectly, I haven't had any problems connecting, disconnecting, charging, any of that stuff. It's just another connector that I do have to take into consideration when I'm setting up all of the things that I use when I'm camping. I would have loved to have seen this be an XT60, which is almost an industry standard at this point for small portable devices. But I do see that there are some other pins in there, leading me to believe that there is additional information being shared between the HVAC unit and the battery itself. If you would like to know more about the Zero Breeze Mark III, check out my link in the video description. I also have a small coupon code there, but if you really want to know how this works in the middle of the summer, make sure you subscribe so that when this video comes out right here, you can find out exactly how this thing performs tent camping in the blazing summer.